Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. Thank you for stopping by. I hope the weekend was good. We had a lot of rain, which is very unusual for this time of year. Let me start with a quotation from Martin Luther King. If you can't fly, then run. If you can't run, then walk. If you can't walk, then crawl. But whatever you do, you have to keep moving forward. Put up a photograph of him. My piece this weekend was a start to the year that goes back decades. One of the finest books on the markets I've ever read is called Reminiscences of a Stock Market Operator by Edwin Lefevre. It was written in 1923 and is an account of the life of the securities trader Jesse Livermore. Lefevre says many things in this wonderful book. He, for example, says, "Another lesson I learned early is that there is nothing new in Wall Street. There can't be, because speculation is as old as the hills. Whatever happens in the stock market today has happened before and will happen again." I've never forgotten that. I suppose I really managed to remember when and how it happened. The fact that I remember that way is my way of capitalizing experience. A busy market did not keep me from thinking about the work. Those quotations did not represent prices of stocks to me. So many dollars per share, there were numbers. Of course, they meant something. They were always changing. It was all I had to be interested in, the changes. Why did they change? I didn't know. I didn't care. I didn't think about that. I simply saw that they changed. That was all I had to think about. 5 hours every day and 2 on Saturdays, that they were always changing. That is how I first came to be interested in the behavior of prices. I had a very good memory for figures. I could remember in detail how the prices had acted on the previous day just before they went up or down. My fondness for mental arithmetic came in very handy. I noticed that in advances as well as declines, stock prices were apt to show certain habits. So to speak, there was no end of parallel cases, and these made precedents to guide me. I was only 14, but after I'd taken hundreds of observations in my mind, I found myself testing their accuracy, comparing the behavior of stocks today with other days. It was not long before I was anticipating movements in prices. My only guide, as I say, was their past performances. I carried the dope sheets in my mind. You can spot, for instance, where the buying is only a trifle better than the selling. A battle goes on in the stock market, and the tape is your telescope. You can depend upon it 7 out of 10 times. There are so many deep truths in this extraordinary book, but the key phrase is the tape is your telescope. The tape since the start of 2016 has been unprecedented. The venerable English Times said last week that the market suffered their worst start to the year since the Great Depression. An economist at RBS advised clients to sell everything except high-quality bonds. Krishna Memani, the chief investment officer at Oppenheimer Funds in New York, told Bloomberg markets go through several stages, and right now they're just holding their head and crying. The Shanghai market is down a whopping 18% since the start of the year. Nigeria's all-shares the second worst performer, having slumped 17.91% over the same period. European stocks fell into a bear market. The tape is narrating a story of financial carnage. The Bloomberg Commodity Index fell to the lowest level in data going back to 1991. Currency markets have seen a massive flight to quality. The South African rand collapsed 10% in the early hours of Monday morning last week before recovering a little. The Naira, whose official rate is just under 200, would now be closer to 350 if freely convertible currency. Investors are buying the yen, the euro and the dollar and dumping everything else as fast as they can. Interestingly, the Kenya shilling has been a big outperformer. In part just, I tweeted last week, the shilling is the new yen. I, like Lefevre, have watched the markets for eternity, and I've never seen anything like this, and that's saying something, because I can remember 1994, 1998, and those were big and seismic events. Mindspeak, if I might remind you, returns on this Friday, the 22nd of January. You're all welcome from 5 to 7 o'clock at the Intercontinental Mara Ballroom. We will be hosting Albert Mugo and his team from Kenya, and I think we'll have an interesting discussion. I'm looking forward to it enormously. If you're interested in knowing what Mindspeak is, there's a link, and also if you want to have a look back and see what and whom we've hosted, please take a look at the link for Mindspeak 2015. Macro Thoughts returned to oil. I said in August 2015, the end is nigh for crude oil and oil producers from Caracas to Luanda, from Riyadh to Abuja. And I said these folks were squealing like pigs and are about to be served up as rashers. The Dow sank 390 points in a global sell-off. Crude fell through $28, that's Brent crude, earlier this morning before rebounding. Bloomberg Commodity Index is at the lowest level in data going back to 1991. Canadian dollar fell for an 11th straight day in its longest run of losses on record, and might try and snap that today, but let's see how it gets on. 10-year note yields slipped below 2% to the lowest level since October. And that's casting doubt on the Fed's ability to raise rates. So a very, very volatile start to the year, as I've already written about. Home thoughts, I like this photograph, Lake Victoria, Kenya, probably the most beautiful sunset anywhere in the world, and it looks beautiful, doesn't it? And then return to George Orwell, 1984, reality exists in the mind, in the human mind, and nowhere else. One does not establish a dictatorship in order to safeguard a revolution. One makes the revolution in order to establish the dictatorship. If both the past and the external world exist only in the mind, and if the mind itself is controllable, what then? Political Reflections, an interesting piece in the New York Times, giving Barack Obama his due, talking about how his election in 2008 swept away the last racial barrier in American politics with ease, and heralded the resurgence of America's ability to astonish and inspire, the beginning of a new era. You couldn't help thinking of these trumpets of hope while watching the greying head of the president on Tuesday night as he walked to the exit. He turned to soak in the scene of his final State of the Union address. "Let me take one more look at this thing," he said. By any objective measurement, his presidency has perhaps been the most consequential since Franklin Roosevelt's time, and I agree with that. Abbas Aslani tweeted a picture of the Iranian Foreign Minister Zarif and Secretary Kerry meeting on Sunday, and this was all about the implementation day. And that takes me back to October 2013 when I wrote about Barack Obama and Hassan Rouhani in a piece I called The Two Husseins. And I said then Hussein and Hassan Rouhani are going to have to cut through a great deal of interference. In this situation, there are powerful vested interests fully invested in the status quo, I said. If the Pax Americana in the Middle East were a three-legged stool with the US, the most important leg, then Israel and Saudi Arabia are the two other legs of that stool. Neither Riyadh nor Tel Aviv are aligned with President Obama's Iranian rapprochement. We're finding that out more and more. And Saudi Arabia in particular has become increasingly forthright and is even threatening its own pivot away from the US, I said then. put up a photograph of President Obama and the message of hope. On the record, what happens after Implementation Day? Implementation Day means that Iran is now free to sell as much oil as it wants to whomever it likes at whatever price it can get. Tsai wins Taiwan's presidency, captures the legislature in a landslide, rode a tide of discontent. Her victory margin was the biggest since Taiwan's first democratic presidential election 2 decades ago, would you believe? The DPP won 68 seats in the 113-seat legislature, gaining its first ever majority and locking the KMT out of power for the first time since Chiang Kai-shek fled with his government across the Taiwan Strait in 1949. Howard French tweeted this: "New president of Taiwan, 59, never married, said of marriage, I won't buy the whole pig just for a sausage." The Chinese are saying Taiwan must abandon the hallucination of independence. And then I also learned China didn't inform Vietnam of Spratly flights, according to Hanoi. And final political reflection is about Patrice Lumumba, who died, who was legally elected the Prime Minister of the DRC and died 55 years and 1 day ago. International markets, nothing is moving. The Baltic Dry Index, as insiders warn, international commerce has come to a halt, and this is a very strong forward indicator of what's going on. Stocks in China bounced, entered a bear market Friday, but bounced marginally today. Fathom Consulting, an economic forecaster, thinks that the growth in China could be as low as 2.4% rather than the official 6.8%, and that's pretty meaningful, let me tell you. The difference between those figures in dollar terms equated to more than the entire economy of the United Arab Emirates. The benchmark Treasury 10-year yield had declined 5 basis points to close at 203, and that's really all about the flight to quality I was talking about. Currency markets, the euro is at 108.91, dollar index, haven't checked it, but at 98.90 area. Japanese yen 117.31, and a break below 116.15 will take the green back to 1-year lows. Swissy 10051, pound 142.97, got a bit of a bounce off of 5.5-year low. The Aussie is at 0.6893. India rupee 67.525, South Korean won 12.1073, Rial 404.79, Egyptian pound 784.18, and the rand 16.673. Sterling, I'll put up a 1-year chart. My target is now 136, and we're currently at 142.99. Canadian dollar is at a 13-year low. It touched 146.50 earlier, and there are expectations that the Bank of Canada might cut rates this week. Let's see how that pans out. My target for the Canadian dollar is 155. Dollar yen 117.31. My target here is 105. Let me put up a 1-month chart of gold. That's at 1088.55, and it sort of keeps on bubbling, but unable to break significantly through this key level of 1100. Brent crude all over the place. Got below $28 on my screen earlier today before rebounding. US crude is around the $30 level as well. Let me put up a 1-year chart. This is the March 2016 contract. I think we're still going lower. Holger tweeted, the Saudi oil minister said he's optimistic crude prices will rise. Holger again, Iranian barrels hitting the market push oil prices lower. Forward markets price sub $50 oil up to 2024, which is pretty extraordinary if you think about it. And I spoke about this. I said, oil-based economies are going to contract, currencies which have already collapsed are going to be routed, and Greek-style austerity will be the order of the day, I said then, in in August 2015. And I was speaking about the 21st century oil warfare specialist taking the oil price down to 20, and in the event he did that, I said Nicolas Maduro will be toast. It's now been confirmed that Nicolas Maduro has called an economic state of emergency, 5-year default risk jumps to higher than $99, and that means that people are betting that it is inevitable that there will be a default. Iranian sanctions, Middle East stock markets crash as Tehran enters oil war. The Saudi Arabia stock market crashed yesterday as nuclear sanctions on Iran were lifted, clearing the path for an all-out oil war between the Middle Eastern rivals. Let's see how that develops now. Holger again, dollar peg seen bending while reserves keep them from breaking. This is referencing the Saudi Riyal. Let's move on to Africa. Al-Qaeda attack in Burkina Faso signals widening West Africa war. I think it's just a matter of time whether it's in Abidjan, Accra or Dakar. It happens in Paris and in Istanbul. It can happen anywhere. Al Jazeera News tweeted this photograph of Ouagadougou, where more than 20 bodies were received at the hospital after the attack. The IMF has said that Mozambique's economy may expand by an annual 24% from 2021 to 2025 once natural gas production begins. And that might be slightly delayed given the markets at the moment. Hyperinflation stalks war-torn South Sudan as prices spike. Inflation has soared off the charts. Have a look at this image. The South African all shares down 7.36% so far this year. Dollar rand, last time I checked, 1667, but I still think prone to enormous sell-offs because of the Jacob Zuma risk. Egyptian pound 784, Egyptian EGX30 down 17.788% this year and at a 27-month low. Yes, there is a witch hunt because there are witches all over the place. This is talking about President Buhari's anti-corruption drive. Nigerian banks have allowed foreign currency transfers as they ease FX restrictions ever so slightly. Central Bank Governor Emefiele said foreign reserves in January stood at around $28 billion compared with $37 billion in June 2014. Nigerian all share has crashed 17.9% so far this year. Ghana Stock Exchange bucking the trend, up 0.63% this year. Somalia received Saudi aid the day it cut ties with Iran, so that says it all. Coming to Kenya, Kenya jets target militants after group says 100 soldiers were killed, which is a huge number. As we speak right now, our troops are engaging the terrorists. We have information to the effect that some soldiers are being used as human shields, and we will not allow any further casualties. Power consumption in Kenya rose to 1,569 megawatts last October, the highest level yet in the country's history, from a peak of 1,512 megawatts the previous year. As more citizens get connected to electricity, this should have a direct positive impact on growth and economic activity, as well as improve their welfare. This is the World Bank lead economist for Kenya, Apurva Sanghi. Treasury plans Eurobond type loan. This is following on the article in the FT. And the Kenya shilling stable as you like, 102.335. Nairobi all share down 2.64% year to date, outperforming Egypt, South Africa, Nigeria. NSE 20 down 4.99% so far this year, similarly outperforming those very same markets. If you want to look into any listed share, just click on the link, which is at the bottom of Rich Wrap-Ups, and take it from there. Once again, thank you for stopping by. I'm always grateful.